Hi, my name is Angie Lauritsen, and I just want to welcome everybody. We are still having a lot of people jump into our webinar today pertaining to the upcoming the Republican tax bill and what's moving that has moved through the House and is now onto the Senate. So we're going to allow some more people to hop into this webinar. So we'll give it a couple more minutes. But I did want to highlight really quick just a little bit about us before we really get running. So again, my name is Angie Lauritsen. I'm the state director for Nebraska For Us. We're a nonprofit here that focuses on federal economic policy. And so as you can imagine, there's just been a lot going on since the beginning of the year. And so our group has really been working with a lot of local nonprofits and other organizations to try to help inform and educate about these federal impacts that we're seeing that are coming from the Trump administration. So anything from EOs down to different funding cuts that we've been seeing, but also the introduction of the reconciliation package is what I've been calling it. It goes by a lot of different names. And so making sure that everyone has a good comprehensive understanding of this is kind of the role that Nebraska For Us has. I'm a past elected official. I do a lot of work within the community. I chair a couple of different nonprofit boards, but with Nebraska For Us, it really hones into my study of policy that I started with the Nebraska legislature, but obviously with this role that we started back in fall of 23, really getting into and diving into federal policy, but most importantly, how does federal policy affect Nebraskans? And so we're really going to dive into, and that's what the purpose of this webinar is today, is to really educate everyone on the impacts to Nebraskans and what we're kind of, what we can anticipate coming. So I am so incredibly grateful for the experts that we have here today, our panelists, and so incredibly fortunate for past elected officials, current elected officials, and those that are really working with clients and boots on the ground when it comes to understanding the impact and what's currently happening prior to this bill and the impacts it'll have here locally for us. So with that, we're starting just a little bit afternoon, but I wanted to give our panelists an opportunity to be able to introduce themselves and talk through a couple different things prior. Then we'll move on to some questions that we've prepared. We'd really love for our attendees to place any questions into the chat. And Colin, I will turn it over to you just for a second, just to fill in any blanks that I may have missed on this introduction.
So I think you covered it pretty well, but I will be focusing pretty closely on any questions that come in to the chat to be able to make sure that they get to the proper expert that is joining us on this panel today. So feel free to drop those in. I'll be keeping a close eye on them throughout the hour, and we'll be sure to jump in with any updates. But just really excited to get this conversation started, and we've got experts joining us from a wide range of backgrounds and experiences, and they're all in really vital roles, helping to keep the community informed and keep a close eye on things.
Perfect. With that, I'm so honored to be able to push it or send it right over to former U.S. Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, Xochitl Torres Small. So please take it from there with a brief introduction and any other thoughts that you'd like before we get started.
Well, thanks everyone. It's an honor and a joy to get to to be part of this conversation today, and specifically for all of the work that's done in Nebraska to make sure that people know what's happening, the stances that people are taking in DC that very much affect the real lives of Nebraskans every single day. When it comes to SNAP, people are dependent on SNAP all across the country. In Nebraska, it's over 150,000 people, many families with children, seniors who rely on it to be able to get through, make ends meet through the end of the month, and people with disabilities. In fact, in Nebraska, almost 13% of Nebraskans don't have enough money to put food on the table. And because of that, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which I was the former deputy secretary for, has partners with states to distribute the SNAP, or what some people call food stamps, in order to be there for families and people who are struggling to make sure they have food to eat and don't go hungry at night.
And Angie, let me just jump in real quick. Just a correction on what I had mentioned. It's not the chat section. You'll want to click the Q&A section for anybody who wants to ask some questions, and then I'll be able to monitor those and be able to share as any of them come in. So Q&A section for anybody who is watching right now from home or from work or wherever you might be to get some of your questions answered. But Angie, we'll send it back over to you to get to our next panelist.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to send it over to State Senator Victor Roundtree.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you so much, and welcome to everyone that's joining online today. I'm State Senator Victor Roundtree. I've just completed my first term in the legislature. I represent District 3, which is Bellevue and Papillion here in Sarpy County. I'm 30-year Air Force retired Chief Master Sergeant, worked with FEMA for about 5 years, a deputy budget officer and a budget officer at Offutt Air Force Base for 7 years. So I bring a lot of background in the financial management arena. Also, I'm a senior pastor here at our church in Bellevue, Endured in Ministries, Church of God in Christ. And we work a lot with our needy and those who just don't have enough to make ends meet. So that's where my heart is. That's where my passion lies. In this past legislature, one of my primary bill was LB 319, which was restoring SNAP eligibility to convicted felons once they had served their time and once they had been restored. We had a tremendous amount of support for that bill. It would definitely help our families, help our members when they're repatriated back to society. But unfortunately, that bill was vetoed. So that's it for this session. But that doesn't mean that it dies. It means I still have passion, and we'll still get ready to take care of our people, and we'll probably see it again. So I look forward to any questions that we may have on this call, and here to serve. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. With that, we'll send it over to Tim Williams with the Food Bank for the Heartland.
Thanks, Angie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Williams, and I am the Government Relations and Advocacy Officer with Food Bank for the Heartland. Food Bank for the Heartland is one of two Feeding America food banks that cover Nebraska. We at Food Bank for the Heartland cover 77 counties across the greater state of Nebraska, and then we also serve 16 counties in western Iowa. We partner with over roughly 500 network partners across our service area, and that includes everything from churches to pantries to schools to meal providers, in order to make sure that our neighbors have access to healthy, nutritious food, culturally appropriate food, and really make sure that they are able to get their needs met. We do that through a variety of programs, from mobile pantries to making sure our pantries have access to food, to our backpack program that really helps address child hunger. We also do a lot of work regarding SNAP outreach and working to connect folks across the state of Nebraska to application assistance in order to get connected to SNAP benefits and walk them through that whole process from start to finish. We operate a hotline that covers the whole state of Nebraska to do that process over the phone. And we'll dive into a lot of the nuances regarding budget reconciliation and SNAP here in a bit, but that's just a little overview of who we are here at the Food Bank.
Thank you so much, Tim. And with that, our final panelist for today, Alicia Christensen with Together Omaha.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am an attorney and the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Together. As an organization, we're committed to ensuring everyone in our community has enough nutritious food and a safe, affordable home. Our Nourish program operates pantry in Omaha and one in Council Bluffs. And we're one of the largest in that area, and one of the only ones that operates 5 days a week with regular hours, allowing our participants to come in when it fits their schedule, and then they choose, it's called a choice pantry, so they choose the groceries that fit their family's tastes and I guess, diet preferences from our options that we and work with the food bank to stock our pantry along with other community partners, businesses, and restaurants for fresh eggs, produce, dairy. And then we also incorporate SNAP and benefits navigation into our intake process so we can make sure that while we're satisfying a family's immediate needs for food that day or for that week, that they can access the benefits that can help them achieve some more long-term stability while they get back on their feet. And I just generally try for upstream interventions at the policy level related to both food security and housing stability to try and make the number of our participants less and less frequent, and to make sure we have the resources we need to serve our communities.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Amazing work. Love what everyone is doing. And thank you again to all of our experts that are on this panel here today. So with that, I'm going to kick it off with a quick question here. So I'm going to start off with, a lot of people don't truly understand what the SNAP program is. So if I can go back to you, can you give kind of a key aspects to the SNAP program and what people might not understand or know about SNAP benefits?
So SNAP supports people all across the country. In Nebraska, 7 out of 10 of the people who get food SNAPs are part of families with kids. And about 3 of the 10 people who get food stamps are either elderly or in facilities that serve either the elderly or disabled. This is seniors who go to the same church with you, or families who have kids that are in class with your kids, or students who are in college. In fact, when I was Deputy Secretary for USDA, I did a tour all around the country and of land grant universities. And regularly I'd have a student come up to me afterwards and ask for help because they were having trouble qualifying for or using their food stamps. And these are kids who are trying to make a better life for themselves and their families, but are also struggling to get food on the table.
Great, thank you. Senator Roundtree, we know that the state legislature went into sine die yesterday, but you obviously were integral in bringing up SNAP and making sure that SNAP stayed in the conversation. And I was just wondering, did you notice any of your fellow senators that would amplify any kind of misconceptions about SNAP or make statements that were untrue about the program? And if so, what is the best way to try to combat some of those misconceptions about SNAP?
Thank you so much, Angie. Yes, as we debated the bills and we talked about, especially like my bill, LB 319, and Senator Dan Quick also brought another bill regarding SNAP and sunsetting, extending those. A lot of the people sometimes believe that SNAP is just another welfare program that once a person is on it, they don't have a desire to improve their life, their situation. And one of the constant things I heard was this taxpayer dollars, even though it was at the federal level, federal funding coming in, but yet taxpayer dollars. So a lot of misconceptions about the members who receive SNAP. But I always try to express the fact that everyone wants to have a better life. And a lot of times we need just a little bit of help to get through a situation, as we've talked about earlier. And once we can help a person pick themselves up, they don't want to stay on SNAP forever. But yet, while it's there's transitory, so let's allow that and to help them. Other thoughts were that all of the benefits should be philanthropy, that there should be no government assistance, no government aid, but that the churches and like the members on this panel, food banks and things of that nature, that should be where all of the support for families that have needs should come from and not from the government. So, but through constant communication, I'm looking at the facts, looking at experiences and having testimony that helps to throw out that particular thought and opinion.
Thank you for that. A lot of the things that we're studying about the reconciliation bill, there's been a lot of talk of a special session coming up because we know that our state budget, it was a patchwork that was kind of hobbled together in order to get something passed for a state budget this year. What do you see here? What are you hearing at the state level when it comes to the impacts if this bill was to go into effect? How do you feel that that would impact our state budget?
Thank you. Yes, it would have a tremendous impact on the state budget. As a matter of fact, when we signed and died yesterday, as the governor gave his closing comments and the speaker gave his, there wasn't a thought of having a special session this year, but we'll come back together again on January the 7th. And yes, that's going to be a lot of budget activity to work. If this passes through, I can say that some of the bills that we had in this particular session, if they had a fiscal note dealing with SNAP or dealing with things that were in the HHS arena, some of those did not come out of the committee. They wouldn't be brought to the floor because of the uncertainty about what was going to happen with this particular bill. So if a lot of these funding opportunities are pushed back down to the state, that's certainly going to be something that we're going to have to deal with. And it will have a tremendously negative impact on the budget, but we'd have to deal with it. So it might be the first thing when we come back in January, or if it happens now, it could still possibly facilitate a special session.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for that. Tim, if I can come over to you, in your expertise and like, what are you seeing? Like, how has the need changed in recent years? Is it growing? Are you able to keep up with the demands currently for our community? And how, I mean, we've all seen like a lot of things. We've seen rising costs. We've seen it's harder to splurge on any of those discretionary items at the grocery store. What are you seeing on the ground when it comes to food needs within our community?
Yeah, both in feedback and also in hard data that our pantry partners provide, we have seen the need and households and individuals served continue to elevate and rise over the last several years. We currently, across our state and across our network, are seeing more people attend or need emergency food assistance than at any point during the height of COVID, for example. An example we like to sort of use, or a timeline reference we like to use in our world, is we look back at the 2008 recession and roughly how long it took for numbers to go back to pre-2008. It took roughly 10 years for our food bank to sort of see numbers sort of dip back below that. And that would bring us to 2018. And since then, we have, in our area, we've seen record floods, we've seen a pandemic, we've seen ongoing and elevated inflation and high grocery prices. So I would say that we are not in a place where we could even push start on that 10-year window where we are expecting to see need really go down. And on top of that, while we are continuing to see need at an elevated rate, we are not seeing the resources raise that are accessible and available to our network and to the food banks that are available to meet that high demand. We do really great work and we do everything we can in a couple areas, and the way that we purchase food, the way that we work with donors to make sure that we have accessible donated food. And we also really do work in tandem with government resources, both with SNAP and through the USDA, to make sure that we have commodity foods, that those are now rising to the level that they need to in order to meet that demand. It's sort of this I say it's this three-legged stool. We purchase food, we donate, and then we have our government support, which comes in a lot of ways. If one of them wobbles, it puts an undue burden on the other and it falls apart. And right now, what we're seeing is that resource really more on the government side, not being able to meet up with the demand and not up to par, but what we're doing on our level. And it's putting that burden, not really more so on the pantry level than it is really on the food banks. And that is forcing us to buy our way out of this, which is a completely unsustainable way at really lowering or addressing food insecurity. So it's like, if you look at it's like this weird graph, it's going up this way with need and it's going down this way with resources. And so it's a really inappropriate, not that there's ever appropriate time, but it's truly an inappropriate time at the moment to really be thinking through how we are cutting back on benefits, whether it's SNAP, Medicaid, or anything really. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear a lot of the reading that I do is just to what Senator Roundtree was talking about was that, well, the nonprofits will be there to kind of lift us up. The nonprofits will be there to kind of catch anybody that falls through the cracks, or our religious institutions will be able to help gather anybody that kind of falls through the cracks. And I think the experts on this call today will tell you that like that's not necessarily the case. We currently don't have the resources or the planning that we've done in the past doesn't fit for what we're facing today when we're talking about the resources that we've had in the past. So I appreciate you echoing that and trying to illustrate to everyone what's happening when it comes to when you start cutting different funding sources from nonprofits that they've seen in the past, that they're not able to fulfill the mission that they've been handling in the past. So thank you for that. But I want to kind of send the same question over to Alicia. If SNAP is cut to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, like how will that impact the work that you are doing on a daily basis?
Man, I should have been ready with the mute button. You gave me a good long time. I would yeah, reiterate that we definitely rely on the philanthropic efforts and the religious institutions in our community to, help with the need that is there. However, when you think about it in terms of sheer numbers, I don't think people who say that can conceptualize what they're really talking about. So to illustrate, our pantry went from serving 91 participants per day in 2023 on average to serving 109 participants per day in 2024. And this year, that number has jumped. And this is not including repeat visits. These are just unique individuals in our community. We're averaging 167 unique participants per day. So I don't know of the religious organization that can handle that cap. And we're just, Heart Ministries, another pantry in Omaha that also does a significant amount of traffic. So the kind of ask that you're putting on us is difficult. That said, how will it impact us on a daily basis? I mean, I think essentially that the proposed cuts, and especially with shifting burden, it's not really cutting costs. It's shifting the costs to the states and to us. They are, I think, will inevitably lead to people losing benefits. The proposed cuts will almost certainly lead to the state reducing benefits, narrowing eligibility, or both. And so, in short, more Nebraskans will experience food insecurity. So that gets thrown around a lot, but I think to help illustrate that means that families worry about being able to afford food. Parents go hungry so their children have enough food to eat. Diet quality worsens as healthier foods are often more expensive, and households are forced to make difficult choices between filling their prescription or having their heat on at a safe temperature in the winter, or getting clothes that fit their children properly to go back to school, or going to visit the doctors, have preventative care. And so to put people in these positions, it's more than just the food. It has all these ripple effects. So more people will rely on emergency food providers like Together to access the food that they need. And we all benefit when everybody has enough to eat. And so we're continuing to work with our community partners and creatively thinking about other strategies because we want to make sure that everybody has enough, and we want to do everything that we can to meet the need in Omaha and Council Bluffs. But it's a tall ask, and I think it would be extremely, I don't know, I kind of don't want to think about it sometimes because it will definitely be a strain on our capacity and resources. I will say that.
Yeah, my mother is 68. We grew up in a military family, And she still talks about or apologizes to myself and my brother about how um, we were fed government cheese, right? Like, so we grew up in a family that did not have resources. And so being one of those kiddos that knows what it feels like to go hungry, this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And we'll continue to have other roundtables like this in the future. But my biggest concern and where I see this going, and not to be total doomsday, but um, do you anticipate sometime in the future where you don't have options, you don't have enough food to provide a rounded meal for people? Will you have to get to a place where you might have to turn people away? Um, is that something that um, not maybe together, but maybe other food pantries may face that in the future if these cuts are made?
I I mean, it's very hard to speculate.
Mhm.
And I think at least I try and stick to the, sort of don't borrow problems kind of, because I think you could go real doomsday. Yeah, you could totally go there. I think it's possible. I think there would be a lot of steps in between, as far as, I think, having less available is certainly, I think, would happen in the intervening time. And I think there's a lot of steps before we get to that point. But I do think that is possible. I think particularly because of the way that this exacerbates the funding cuts, in that if they do a part where the state, not to take too much time, but if the state has to do a match and they can only afford, say, $30 million, $30 million is, if they have a 15% match, is only $200 million in benefits. Right now, we have over $300 million in benefits. So that's immediately cutting that. If we have a recession, the state revenue falls because we don't have as much sales tax, we don't have as much personal income tax, we don't have as much corporate income tax, and our state has to balance the budget. So right when more people need SNAP, we as a state would be forced to narrow benefits, narrow eligibility, because we can't just make sure people have it. And so that would exacerbate the need. It also prolongs the recovery period because then people don't have that income to spend at the grocery store that they would otherwise have. So it really undermines its automatic stabilizing effect as the SNAP's automatic stabilizing effect. So I think that those kinds of situations, if we hit a recession, yes, I think we'll get to that point that you kind of doomsday predict quicker than we would otherwise.
Thank you for that. So if I can go back to you, so data from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities in 2024 also showed that Nebraskans on average received $179 per person per month. While it is not exactly much considering how high grocery prices have gotten, a recent analysis showed it looked at tens of thousands of Nebraskans above the poverty line. What other reasons do you feel make this program so important to protect?
It impacts everybody in the community. My grandmother ran a food pantry that was operated out of her bank or out of her church, and she would tell me about how at the end of every month the numbers just dramatically increased, and it's because food stamp dollars had been used up. And so now suddenly people needed to just make it to that end of the month before the next paycheck. So it's going to impact everyone who's already part of that safety net. But it also impacts the economy. The USDA did a study that found that for every dollar of SNAP benefits, it generates $1.50 in economic activity. And you ask kind of where does that economic activity go? Well, it goes to the grocery store clerk who now has a job because there's a grocery store in a more rural area that gets some of its money from SNAP dollars that are spent. It goes to the farmer. In fact, there's been a recent study that shows if these SNAP cuts cuts occur, this $290 billion of cuts that they're using to pay for tax breaks for the wealthy, if that happens, it's going to be a $30 billion price tag on top of that for farmers because it's lost revenue for them. And then it's about over 27,000 retailers all across the country that are able to keep a food store open, a grocery store open in a poor neighborhood that would turn into a food desert because they no longer have that income walking in the door. It's going to impact all of us. It's going to leave states without options when you talk about the budget. And that's why I'm so grateful for leadership like Senator Roundtree to make sure that we're standing up to this threat.
Thank you for that. With that, I'd like to go over to Senator Roundtree and what are some of your plans or priorities for the next session in 2026? I know that you just got done yesterday, but we know that you go into bill preparation for the next session almost immediately. So Senator, what are you envisioning? What type of bills specifically around food insecurity and SNAP might you bring, and what conversations might you have in the interim period pertaining to the subject?
Thank you, Andy. Yes, we will still be looking at SNAP. We'll look at affordable housing. As a matter of fact, I do have some studies that we'll be doing over the interim. Looking at things as I serve on our Judiciary Committee, looking at juvenile justice and other justice actions. My goal is really to take care of the least of these. I have appreciated everyone's comments, and Alicia, I especially appreciate, dealing with food banks and giving out food. We try to support our food bank here in Bellevue at my small church. Every month at the beginning of the month, she sends out what the needs are for this month, and we gather those all, and towards the end of the month, we'll take it down. So trying to help at least a couple of families if we're able to do that. And I know that, and when we heard our SNAP bill, LB 319 over the past period, we had so much testimony that came in from our nonprofit organizations, our religious organizations, and really they are just stretched thin almost to breaking, which is why it's so important. So I'll continue to look at those items and look at this particular legislation if this bill passes, and we do have another shortage here of funding here in the state. We'll look at how we're going to best be able to distribute that to the people that have needs. And also, as I said, looking at affordable housing, making sure that people have good places to live. I work a lot with our developmentally disabled community. So I'll be looking at their integration into our communities, their housing in our communities. So that's where I'll be during the summertime. And those are the items that I do want to bring back on next year. Just always trying to take care of the least of these.
Thank you so much for your leadership in that. Tim, if I can come to you, we understand policy. You and I could sit around and talk about policy all the time. If you had a wish list, if you had just when you were out talking to elected leaders, what are some proactive things that we can look forward to, or we can ask our elected leaders of how best to support those that ultimately need SNAP to be able to help them stay above water?
That's a really great question, Angie. I think, because there are such dynamic threats to the way that SNAP is potentially going to be sort of implemented and funded moving forward, I think really the best way that folks can lift up and talk and communicate about SNAP is really to take a lot of what's been shared here to talk about the benefits, how SNAP's important, how it interacts with various sectors of both, the community and the economy, and really that it is really the most efficient tool that we have in our toolbox at lowering food insecurity rates, not only in Nebraska, but really across the country. That without SNAP, it puts that greater burden on our pantry system that it cannot take. And so really just honing in and lifting up that key aspect of SNAP and how important it really is. And it really, when we talk about it in that sort of level, it can really be beneficial to break down some of those myths that people may have and misconceptions around who's on SNAP, how long they're on SNAP, what they're using SNAP for. And because really right now it's just talking about and elevating the importance of the program and what would happen if it goes away, which is really the key thing that I would communicate.
Thank you for that. We've been hearing a lot from our Republican delegation, a lot about work requirements. And so a lot of the food SNAP eligibility, Medicaid eligibility, a lot of those, the language that they're using is that it's wrapped around work requirements. I can go into this and I can answer some questions, but Soch, I was wondering if you could provide just a little bit of education about or how best to try to talk about work requirements and when it comes to eligibility and the fluctuation of work just to qualify, or even the paperwork, red tape, the barriers that people have to qualify for these. Can you touch on that?
I think part of the reason why Republicans use this tactic is they want to perpetrate a lie that food stamps go to people who won't work. And the reality is, the majority of people in Nebraska who receive SNAP dollars are already working. The other reality is that we already have work requirements as part of SNAP. It was part of a robust negotiation in the Clinton era where there were changes made that impacted families, that impacted single moms. But because we recognize that this is that funding is limited and we've got to invest where it most makes sense. So there's already work requirements. And for folks who aren't currently working and also not caretaking, this is temporary relief. They're not on SNAP forever. They only have a temporary time to get back up on their feet as they're searching for jobs, as they're looking for other options. The minority of folks who aren't working or and are receiving SNAP benefits are usually doing caretaking. So they either have a disability, they're caring for someone with a disability, or they're caring for a family. And one example that I heard about the work requirements that Republicans are now trying to oppose, the Republican House members who voted for this package, it was a completely partisan vote, that, it impacts single moms and single dads specifically, right? So they want to impose exceptions for a two-parent household so that one of the parents could stay at home and care for the kids because childcare is so expensive. But they won't do the same thing if you're a single mom trying to make it. So this is going to impact people all across the country. It's also going to impact states in terms of administrative burden. So say that you are a senior who's applying for food stamps, so you don't have to choose between food and your medication that's also being cut with Medicaid. So you're trying to figure this out and you're applying for SNAP, but now there's fewer state workers who are running through the applications helping you apply because they're all enforcing these new work requirements that were just changed. Listen, the other argument that Republicans are making about making these cuts is they want to stop fraud, waste, and abuse. Well, if they really wanted to do that, they'd invest in the state systems that address that. Because when there is fraud, waste, and abuse, we all want to stop it. We want this support to go to the people who deserve it. But you do that by investing in a system, not by constantly changing the rules that make it harder and harder for people to be able to get food on their table.
Yeah.
And
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Colin.
go ahead, but I was just going to let you know we do have a few questions that have come in, so happy to be able to jump in. I will say that most of them have already kind of been answered as we've been making our way through the panel, so great job to everybody who is here, and continue having those questions come in. But Angie, if you wanted to add your thought in, and then I can go to a couple of the questions that our attendees have shared with us.
Yeah, I just want to provide just a little bit of history too for those that are attending. If during Medicaid expansion here for the state of Nebraska, then Governor Ricketts looked at doing Medicaid requirements here, or not work requirements here within the state. And so during that process, it was determined that it would cost too much money for the state to handle the administration costs for doing the requirements. So then that plan was didn't go through. I also just want to bring up the fact of we live in a very transient area, right? Like we all have to have a car to get to work. I personally know single moms that if they have a sick kiddo and they have to miss work that day because they need to stay home with their sick kiddo, or if the car breaks down and there's a fee for that. I also know that like the leading cause of homelessness within Sarpy County is medical debt. There's ripple effects that families are facing on a daily basis and stressors that they are facing. And to Alicia's point, there is just a large group of people that like they're constantly, they don't have the support systems here to try to help lift them up, and they're just trying to figure things out. And when we're only talking about a little over $100 per person per month, that's not a lot. So we're not, there's a misconception for a lot of people that families are getting thousands of dollars a month to provide food. That's not the case. And so I guess with that, Colin, I will give it over to you to see if there's any questions that we have not answered that we could address.
Sure. So just a couple that Angie, you and I think can handle first real quick. The first one from Autumn is asking about state-specific estimates on the economic impact of SNAP cuts in Nebraska. We've actually been asked this by some reporters in recent weeks. And the challenge right now is it's still kind of in the examination phase. We know that there are more than 150,000 individuals in Nebraska that received SNAP benefits in 2024. So about almost 10% of our state's population. So quite a solid chunk there, but still kind of early in the process as all of this is being considered. We know that there are almost $300 billion in cuts being proposed at the federal level. And that'll undoubtedly lead to cuts for benefits. And so we're still working on, examining it not only from our end at Nebraska For Us, but there are a lot of organizations across the country that are really looking at it as well. So that's something we're going to continue to monitor and work to provide those details on and continue doing, events like this where we're going to be raising awareness and providing more information that's useful to members of the community. We did have someone who jumped on late, just to confirm for anybody else who jumped on late as well. This is being recorded. So if you missed anything, if you weren't able to hop on until about halfway through or anything like that, this will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll have it on nebraskaforus.org, which is our website, and we'll be sharing these relevant materials on our social channels as well. So if there is anything specifically that you maybe weren't able to write down or we're hoping to hear reiterated, that is where you'll be able to access that information. So important to have that information in there and make sure that we're keeping a close eye on things. Senator Roundtree, there is a question directed to you specifically, just asking whether Governor Pillen gave a reason for his veto of LB 319. If you could fill us in on what you heard and fill our guests on what happened there.
Thank you so much, Colin. Yes, when the governor vetoed the bill, he did send his letter out as far as why he was vetoing it. And one of the great portions of that was we should not be using public dollars to fund drug distributors and drug distribution processes and so forth. A lot of the other part was that they already have a process in place for our two-time offenders. And then also, because in this particular bill, a lot of the things we've done in the legislature, we always talked about Iowa or talked about other states that are around us that have done things well. Well, Iowa does not have, they've lifted their ban totally on the drug offenders and so forth. But in this one, we didn't follow after Iowa. And he said basically has a two-strike already in process, but for a third strike, that's not redemption in that. So that's where it's cut off.
And one more question that came in, more related to the state level, and I believe the answer to this question is no, but Senator, you might have more insight. Cindy's asking whether Senator Quick's LB 192 has been signed yet.
LB 192 did pass, and from our communication yesterday, there weren't going to be any other vetoes. Now, Cindy will also understand that LB 192 did have the hostile amendment on it by Senator Anderson, and that was also dealing with the work requirements. So I don't think it's going to be vetoed because my bill got vetoed, but his went through with that hostile amendment for the work requirement.
Thank you, Senator. And then did have Kathy ask just for a repeat of the website information. So it is nebraskaforus.org. And what we can do is we have a list of all of the attendees who RSVP'd to this event, and I'm more than happy to distribute materials, whether it's this video specifically on our YouTube channel, and our announcement or press release that has some more information about it as well. That'll all be included on our website. Again, that's nebraskaforus.org. And we'll have that on there, but we'll also be sure to reach out to attendees who were able to RSVP and join us today. And we see more than 60 of you in there. So really appreciate everybody jumping in today. Angie would like to send it back to you if any other questions that kind of came to mind for you or anything that any of our panelists would kind of like to share in addition to what we've been discussing so far this afternoon.
Yeah, so we're 45 minutes into this, so I just want to warn our panelists that I'm going to send it back over to you to provide any final thoughts before we close off today. I did want to let everybody know that the Congressional Budget Office on every Thursday, they provide out additional data and information. This Thursday, they will be finalizing data on the House bill, the reconciliation package that passed from the House, went to the Senate. They will be providing more information. So we'll have updated information as far as the impact on people. So you may hear numbers jump. So if we're talking about certain cuts to people for Medicaid cuts and SNAP cuts, we're anticipating those numbers to rise. So we'll have updated information come on Thursday. And so obviously follow us to get some updated information. We'll either put it out in a newsletter or on our social channels, probably both. There's a great question in the chat. So I'm going to send this over to Xoch, but I think there's a lot of questions when it comes to SNAP and how it affects rural, but also farmers within our state. And I grew up on a farm and still have family members that are farming that land. But I think there's a misconception on how much food grade corn or soybeans are actually created here within the state. Most of it is just sent off for ancillary purposes, but also it's made into feed for other livestock, that kind of thing. But when we're talking about SNAP cuts and what that really does and how that affects farmers, can you talk about that and expand on that just a little bit so people can kind of understand?
Yeah. Well, first I'll just take the macro view because I think tariffs, I really appreciate the question in the chat. Tariffs are having a huge impact on food prices and other prices. So when it's a farmer who is trying to sell to China, trying to sell to Mexico, or whether it's a farming cooperative that actually does some growing in Mexico and growing in Canada to even out to stretch out that growing season, this is impacting their bottom lines right now. And when it comes to commodities that are traded, China is one of the largest consumers of the corn and soy that are grown in our country. It's also impacting prices. And then the Trump administration is doubling down on higher prices when it comes to making it harder for people to pay for food through SNAP cuts and harder for people to pay for their medical care through Medicaid cuts. But when it comes to the SNAP costs to farmers, as I mentioned before, there's a $30 billion loss to farmers because SNAP dollars can't buy the food that they are growing and producing. It also impacts farmers when it comes to negotiating a farm bill. So when I served in Congress, two of the committees I served on were House Ag Committee and Armed Services Committee. And what I loved about those committees is there were reliable bills that passed that were bipartisan to solve our nation's problems. Well, that's gone out the window. The Farm Bill is now 2.5 years overdue, and and no clear pathway in sight. In fact, this big bad bill is actually going to make it even harder because it's taking money out of the farm bill through SNAP cuts and putting it into the budget process. So farmers who are waiting on those commodity programs, waiting on those conservation programs or farm loan programs are stuck waiting with uncertainty because of the tariffs, because of decreased bottom line and revenue from SNAP, and now because they're still waiting for a farm bill.
Great, thank you. I'll end with you. So was there any final thoughts? But I want to go to Senator Roundtree. What kind of final thoughts do you have pertaining to today's subject matter?
Angie, no, this has been a tremendously informative forum, so I appreciate everyone coming on today. Just to go back to, I think, Cindy's question about LB 192, that has not been signed by the governor yet. Just pulled it up and took a look at it, but it did pass with over 41 votes in the affirmative on that. And as the governor stated, he didn't anticipate vetoing anything else, so that should be a good bill that'll press on through since it did get their amendment they were asking for. So we'll just continue to work. We'll continue to keep our ear to the ground and be aware of all that's going on. And when we need to step in the game to fight for our people, we'll continue to do that. So that's where I'll leave it. We'll do our summer work, do our interim studies, and be prepared to come back in 2026 to bring good legislation that's going to impact all of our Nebraskans in a positive way.
Yeah, with that, I would like to tell everybody that they're in bill creation mode now. So if you have any bill ideas, Senator Roundtree is obviously an amazing advocate and work. So definitely take those ideas to him to get started on working on some of those bills. Tim, I'd like to send it over to you with any final thoughts pertaining to the subject matter.
Yeah, I think I'll, lift up some of the stuff that we've talked about earlier in the fact that us here at the food bank and our partners and really the nonprofit sector, we will never waver or default on our mission in order to make sure that our neighbors across the state of Nebraska have access to the food that they need. So we are all in the places that we can be all in at. The struggle moving forward is that collaboration in programs that are very vital, not only to operations, both at the food bank and pantry level, but to how people access a wide variety of the safety net. And all of us together need to come to the table and collaborate together in order to meet that need. And what's on the table regarding SNAP in particular has the ability to dramatically alter how this program will function moving forward for a generation that may not be able to just, snap our fingers and change. And so if you take anything from this, I would lean on how dramatic of a change and how it will really exacerbate a problem that is already very stark across the state of Nebraska. Again, not to be all doom and gloom, but I think it's just what we're facing here at the moment.
Well, thank you for that. Alicia, do you have some final thoughts for everybody today?
Well, of course, I do, Angie. I wanted to circle back on, I think just talking about I wanted to follow on with the talk about sort of the stereotypes and how they're being sort of used to justify these cuts. And I think what's most insidious about that in some ways is that a lot of this is to sort of underwrite the cost of historic tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. And so I think that these assistance programs are good and they're effective and they help people recover from setbacks, or they're often the thing that helps people, the most vulnerable among us, have the basic necessities. So when the cost of living is hurting everyone, it could be any of us, arguably, that are just one paycheck away from a crisis. So these programs are the safety net for when Americans fall on hard times. We have to protect them and strengthen them because they need to be there. So if we need them, our loved ones need them, our neighbors, but they need to be there for us. And so just to reiterate that the solution here is not to cut the services. We can make them work better. And instead of gutting this food assistance or any of the other Medicaid or these other assistance programs. We need to fix the programs by making the wealthy pay what they owe in taxes, and then everyone can afford the basics. And I just also want to mention that thanks to Senator Roundtree's efforts, that the effort to end the SNAP lifetime ban for people with certain drug-related felony convictions went the furthest in Nebraska it has ever gone, and we have tried for years. And so I want to congratulate Senator Roundtree on such an amazing effort. It was a heartbreaker, but that I've never seen it get so far, and that was buoyed my spirits. And just to draw everyone's attention, when you're contacting Senator or Representative Bacon's office, he has in the past couple of Congress sessions, I'm getting my federal and state stuff mixed up, sorry, sponsored the Restore Act, which would eliminate that ability for states to opt into banning felons from SNAP benefits for all states. So Nebraska wouldn't even have the option to do it. So it takes it completely off the table. So in your calls to his office, you might mention how you're a big supporter of the restoring the SNAP benefits for everyone. And with that, that's kind of just what I wanted to throw that in there to say that there's still that hope for the farm. It'll be part of the farm bill if it advances, excuse me.
Yeah, exactly. I know that we started off today with kind of an explainer of where we're at and kind of what's happening. So I kind of want to finish this off, and then I'll hand it over to Colin to kind of talk about next steps and some calls to action, and I'll kind of brief that a little bit too. But so a big part of this is what we're talking about is the reconciliation package. Republicans have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the White House. And so they have created this tax bill that they're trying to move through, and it incorporates so many different things. And it not only does it have tax policy in it, but it has other pieces of where you're adding and taking away within this reconciliation package. But they also have the debt limit that is sitting in there. So everything is within this package that are normally not together. Usually these are separate bills that are moving through the House and through the Senate, but it passed through the House back on the 22nd. And so now it is over on the Senate side of things. And so there's a different dynamic when it comes to the Senate with everything that is placed within this tax bill. There's been so much confusion about appropriation bills and what keeps the government open and this tax bill. So I just want to reiterate to everyone that those are two separate things. And because the House subcommittees are starting to work on those appropriation bills, there's going to be more confusion within our communities. And so I really want to stress to everybody that right now our focus is on those tax bills. We can continue to talk about the appropriation bills that need to be passed before September 30th, but this tax bill is really the focus that we have right now, and has those cuts that we'll see to SNAP and to Medicaid. And so right now it is so important for us to be reaching out to our federal delegation, especially Senator Fisher, but please reach out to Senator Ricketts also in their offices to let their staff know just how detrimental these cuts would be to our community. Any changes that happen within the Senate, that package will then have to go back to the House for another vote. So now is not the time to take the foot off the gas when it comes to reaching out to our House members. So that includes Congressman Bacon, Flood, and Smith. So continue to reach out to them with some of the things that you heard within this webinar here today. With that, Colin, I'll send it over to you for any calls to action. Quick.
Sure. So just for easy access for anybody who is looking to contact Congressman Bacon's office specifically, his team is very receptive to outreach and calls, and we think it's really important, if you want your voice to be heard, to know that that is an option, and it is valuable to be able to provide whatever perspective that you have. The number to his office, and we have this included on our website as well, is 402-938-0300. Again, that is 402-938-0300. And if you look up any of these members of Congress, whether they're on the House or Senate side, they have different ways that you're able to reach out to them, whether it's through an email form, if you'd rather call the office. There are a lot of different ways to be able to reach out to them and make sure that your perspective is heard. So just want to make sure to kind of clear up that process a bit for anybody who is watching today and isn't necessarily sure about reaching out, or maybe you've never called your representative's office before. We want to be able to help provide that outlet for you to be able to share whatever your viewpoints are on any of these key economic issues, and make sure that members of Congress are in tune with and aware of uh, what what their constituents rather are feeling on a day-to-day basis. So, Angie, I'll send it back over to you.
Perfect. So coming next for us is when we were planning out this particular roundtable, we ran into a lot of different circumstances where there was a lot of other topics that we should be covering or different angles that we should be covering this through. So obviously today there was a big focus on local food banks and different SNAP proposals that were on the state level that we've been fighting or working with. So what we found out was that there's a whole other farmer angle that we need to be talking about too, and rural angle too. So we're planning on doing another roundtable like this, but including more of that rural voice and farmer voice. We also got feedback too about kiddos in the classroom and our healthcare workers and what they're kind of seeing with food need. And so we'll be creating another roundtable pertaining to that, to have that focus there. So look to us to have create these other future events. And so with that, I just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists for your time today, your expertise, and the work that you were doing in this area. Please stay in touch. I'll be in touch with you to work through and continue the conversation. Thank you to everyone that attended today. So thankful for you giving us of your time and energy. And there's a lot of advocates that were in here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for all of the work that you are also doing with your community and with your clients and everybody that you're trying to help. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing there. With that, I will get you back to your day. And thank you again so much for coming out and learning with us today.